ago, horrifying floods and landslides completely wiped out a village in China. Welcome to the latest issue of Top Secret. In just a moment, a peaceful village in China was wiped out by nature's terrifying fury. Torrential floods surged like monsters, combined with a terrible landslide from the high mountains, engulfing houses, crops, and civil lives. The roar of earth and rocks mixed with desperate cries for help turned the Qingping highlands into a sea of sorrow and death. Is anyone still alive amidst the fury of the mountains? A seemingly peaceful morning in a small village nestled in China's highlands suddenly turned into an unforgettable nightmare. A rumbling sound echoed from afar, initially just a vague noise in a quiet mountain space. But within seconds, the entire mountain seemed to awaken, roaring with fury, shaking everything. A massive landslide suddenly descended, carrying huge rocks, thick mud, and uprooted ancient trees. Nature's terrifying power swallowed part of the village in an instant, burying simple thatched roofs, winding paths, and lush green rice fields in bloom. As tranquility couldn't. In just a moment, their peaceful lives were erased, replaced by a scene of devastation where earth, rocks, and mud covered everything. The landslide didn't act alone. Days before, heavy rain had poured incessantly, each drop like a hammer striking the ground, causing rivers in the area to swell, swirling waters seemingly wanting to break all boundaries. The landslide worsened the situation when earth and rocks from the slopes blocked the river's natural flow. These makeshift earthen dams let the river water with no escape, overflowing the banks with terrifying force, turning simple village streets into raging rivers. Bridges, houses, and everything in the flood's path were submerged in a mixture of mud and murky water. As laughter and adults. As cries for help blended with nature. Survivors, in horror, could only look back at what was once their home, now just unrecognizable rubble. T. Justin what? An elderly woman recounted that she was lighting the stove to prepare breakfast when she felt the ground shake. She barely managed to run to the yard before the roof collapsed behind her. Such stories aren't rare. Each survivor carries a painful memory, an indelible image of the fateful day that changed their lives forever. Nature, once the village's companion, now became an unforgiving enemy, leaving behind a devastated land and broken hearts. The deep wounds of the countryside. T. just dry damage statistics, but deep wounds imprinted on both the countryside and people. Many houses, from simple thatched huts to sturdy brick homes, were completely flattened. Crumbled walls, shattered tiles, leaving only piles of debris covered in mud, as if they'd never been shelters for families. Some houses were swept away by the flood without a trace, as if they never existed on this land. The rice fields, the village's livelihood where people poured sweat and hope for a productive harvest, were now buried under meters of thick mud. The upcoming harvest, a hope of many families, was extinguished before it even began. Roads, from small paths leading into the village to concrete bridges connecting areas, were all destroyed or deeply submerged. Roads that once echoed with children's footsteps going to school, the clattering bicycles of farmers heading to field, now became makeshift rivers, cutting off all connections between the village and the outside world. Villagers fell into isolation, unable to receive immediate help or contact relatives elsewhere. A middle-aged woman shared that she tried calling her son working in the city, but there was no signal. She could only sit by the rubble of her house, praying her child wouldn't worry too much upon hearing about the disaster. The village's infrastructure also suffered heavy losses. Power lines were torn apart, tangled wires hanging precariously, becoming hazards for anyone daring to pass. The clean water supply system, already fragile in this highland area, was completely destroyed, leaving people without drinking water amidst the sea of flood. Communication with neighboring towns was disrupted. Phones had no signal. Internet became an unattainable luxury. When night fell, the entire area sank into darkness, with only faint lights from flashlights and crackling radios broadcasting rescue news. In such harsh circumstances, people could only rely on each other, sharing whatever remained from a pack of dry noodles to a thin blanket. But that sharing, though warm, couldn't erase the pain of those who had just lost everything. Villagers, who just minutes before were living simple lives, suddenly fell into extreme panic. Many fled desperately, wading through waist-deep water, trying to find their way to higher ground to escape. Some clung to tree trunks or climbed onto roofs, hoping the raging water wouldn't sweep them away. An elderly man, with a trembling voice, recounted hearing the ground shake, followed by the whirring sound of earth, rocks, and water. He barely managed to pull his grandchild and run up the hill before watching his house get buried under mud. Such memories aren't just personal pain, but the shared pain of the entire community, where everyone lost part of their life, part of their hope. Disasters not only destroy homes and property but also leave mental scars and fears that will follow them for life. The struggle for survival amidst the raging waters. As news of the devastating landslides and floods spread, rescue teams were quickly dispatched to the small village in China's highlands. But the journey to reach those trapped was not easy. Once sturdy concrete bridges were now just debris floating in the floodwaters. Trails leading into the village were blocked by rocks and soil from the mountainsides, while the rushing waters seemed ready to swallow anyone who dared approach. Rescue teams, including the military, firefighters, and brave local volunteers, faced harsh challenges. They waded through freezing water, sometimes chest deep, climbed over sharp rubble, and remained vigilant against rocks still tumbling from unstable slopes. Each step they took was a confrontation with danger, but their determined eyes and unwavering resolve wouldn't let them stop. Rubber boats became the primary rescue vehicles in the battle against the water. Rescuers tied ropes around themselves to resist the flood's force, carefully pulling each elderly person, child, and exhausted individual out of the boat. A young volunteer, with hands trembling from the cold, recounted the moment he helped an old woman safely carry her grandchild onto the boat. The old woman, soaked and shaking with fear, barely managed to say thank you before bursting into tears. The grandchild, eyes wide with panic, clung tightly to her as if afraid of being swept away. Such moments, though small amid the chaos, were powerful motivation for rescue teams to keep working tirelessly. They worked through the night, despite fatigue and lurking dangers, from new landslides to potentially rising waters. On higher ground, where floodwaters hadn't reached, medical tents were set up urgently to care for the injured. Medicine, warm blankets, dry food, and clean water were airdropped into isolated areas where roads were completely cut off. But time was the rescue team's greatest enemy. Many families were still missing, possibly trapped in rubble or isolated in remote, inaccessible areas. Helicopters continuously circled the sky, using loudspeakers to call on survivors to signal their location by any means possible. From waving clothes to each time a person was saved, the rescue team erupted in joy mixed with tears. But that joy was quickly replaced by worry as they thought of those still missing, who might be waiting in despair amid mud and floodwaters. Every passing minute was a race against death, and rescue teams knew they couldn't slow down, even as their bodies were exhausted from hours of non-stop work. Stories of the rescue team's sacrifices spread throughout the area, becoming a source of inspiration amid the sorrow. A firefighter recounted how he dove into the murky water to pull a child trapped in debris. When he got the child to shore, he realized he was injured in the leg, but the child's smile made him forget the pain. Such efforts not only saved lives but also ignited hope that no matter how cruel nature is, the human spirit never surrenders. The threat still loomed. The landslides and floods not only caused immediate wounds but also put the entire region on high alert as new risks persisted. Environmental experts warned that the ground, after days of continuous rain absorption, had become extremely unstable. New cracks appeared on the mountainsides, like frightening whispers of potential further landslides. Flash floods, an equally dangerous phenomenon, could strike at any time if new rains continued to pour down. Weather forecasts showed the sky had no signs of calming, with more heavy rain approaching, keeping the area tense. Every clap of thunder, every drop of rain, was a reminder that nature hadn't relented. Local authorities quickly issued emergency evacuation orders for nearby communities, urging people to leave dangerous areas and seek shelter centers. Temporary shelters, from schools and cultural houses to warehouses, were mobilized and quickly filled with people. Many families brought the few remaining belongings they had, cramming into narrow rooms, but they felt lucky to be alive. A young mother holding her child shared that she didn't know if her home would still stand when the floodwaters receded, but what mattered most was that her family was still together. However, anxiety was evident on every face. They didn't know when they could return or if their lives could return to normal after this deluge. The danger wasn't just from nature. The lack of clean water and food in some areas increased the risk of disease outbreaks. Medical teams worked tirelessly to vaccinate, distribute medicine, and ensure hygiene, but limited resources made this difficult. Meanwhile, those who lost their homes faced the biting cold of rainy nights as temperatures in the highlands dropped significantly. Many had only thin clothing, insufficient to keep warm in the harsh conditions. For them, each passing day was a battle for survival, not just against the floodwaters but against the mounting difficulties after the disaster. Huddled in a corner of the rescue tent, said he had lived through many rainy seasons but had never seen nature so fierce. He worried that if the rain didn't stop, this entire land could be wiped out completely. These risks weren't just a problem for the present but also a warning for the future. Experts believe climate change, with increasingly extreme rains, is raising the frequency and severity of such disasters. Without environmental protection measures and infrastructure improvements, villages like this will remain in nature's crosshairs. Meanwhile, the people and local authorities are doing everything they can to hold on, but they know this battle is far from over. The flame of compassion in the darkness. Amid the devastation and sorrow caused by the landslide and flood in the small village of China's highlands, a miracle is quietly shining. The spirit of human unity, like a flame burning in the darkness, becomes the source of strength helping them overcome the great deluge. Neighbors who once only acknowledged each other with hurried nods have now become solid support for one another. They share each packet of dry noodles, each bottle of clean water, and simple yet warm words of encouragement, helping each other maintain faith to continue living. An elderly woman, despite losing the home she had lived in her entire life, patiently stands by a makeshift stove in the evacuation area, cooking hot pots of porridge to distribute. She says that even though she has nothing left, she still wants to do something so the children don't have to go hungry. That small action, amidst the scene of ruins, is proof that compassion never truly extinguishes. Volunteers from all over the country, from big cities to remote rural areas, flock to the disaster area with open hearts. They bring clothes, food, medicine, and sincere words of comfort, as if wanting to soothe the emotional wounds of the people. The relief trucks, despite having to traverse muddy, flooded, and slippery roads, persistently move forward, bringing a glimmer of hope to those in despair. On social media platforms, thousands of encouraging messages are sent from people who have never set foot in a small village. They write words of blessing, share stories of resilience, and call for more support from the community. The entire country seems to be turning towards the highlands, praying for the people to overcome this disaster. These actions, whether big or small, are like rays of light, somewhat dispelling the darkness of the catastrophe. The stories of kindness don't stop at material sharing. In the crowded evacuation shelter, a group of children, despite having just lost their homes and childhood memories, organize a singing session to boost everyone's spirits. Their clear singing voices rise in the gloomy space of the relief tent, where the smell of mud and exhaustion still lingers. The simple folk songs, the cheerful melodies, make many adults unable to hold back their tears. A father holding his small child shares that the children's singing reminds him of peaceful times and gives him more strength to carry on. Those moments, however small amidst countless sorrows, are vivid proof that no matter how cruel nature is, humans can still find the light of hope in each other. The unity, compassion, and resilient will of the people have turned the disaster into a story of life, of humanity's ability to overcome adversity. A warning from nature's wrath. The devastating landslide and flood in this small village are not just a tragic event, but also a powerful warning to all humanity about the uncontrollable power of nature. It reminds us that irresponsible actions towards the environment, from deforestation and excessive land exploitation to uncontrolled waste disposal, are leading severe consequences. Climate change with increasingly extreme and unpredictable rainfall is making natural disasters more frequent and fierce than ever before. Scientists have long warned that global warming will increase the frequency of extreme weather phenomena, from floods and landslides to violent storms. What is happening in China, from this small village to other areas affected by the 2025 rainy season, is the clearest evidence of those predictions. The infrastructure system, despite heavy investment of billions of dollars over decades, still proves fragile against the power of nature when it rages. The dikes built to prevent floods are shaken by floodwaters. The concrete bridges, once proud symbols of modern engineering, are now just floating debris. Even structures designed to withstand harsh weather cannot stand against the floodwaters and mudslides. This disaster raises a big question for policymakers worldwide: how to build a more sustainable infrastructure system that can cope with the growing challenges from climate change. How to protect millions of people, especially those living in vulnerable areas like this highland region, where nature can change in the blink of an eye. The lesson from the disaster doesn't just lie in building stronger dikes or more modern drainage systems. It also lies in how humans treat nature, how we manage the precious resources of the earth. Protecting forests, which hold the soil and prevent landslides, is a crucial step. Effective water resource management, pollution reduction, and transitioning to renewable energy sources are necessary actions to reduce the risk of future disasters. But above all, it requires a profound change in awareness, from the government level to each individual. Every small decision, from not littering, saving water, to participating in tree planting, can contribute to creating a safer planet. China, as one of the world's largest economies, has the opportunity to lead the fight against climate change, but that requires strong commitment and concrete action. The disaster in this village is a painful reminder that nature never compromises with those who underestimate it. But it is also an opportunity for humanity to reflect, learn, and change. The people here, despite losing their homes and property, are resiliently standing up, joining hands to rebuild their lives. Their story is proof that no matter how powerful nature is, human will, when connected by compassion and unity, can overcome all challenges. But to prevent similar disasters in the future, we must act today with responsibility and foresight. The journey ahead. Although the disaster has left deep wounds, the reconstruction journey has begun. Local authorities are planning to restore infrastructure, from rebuilding roads and bridges to providing temporary housing for the people. International and domestic organizations have committed financial and human resources to help the village overcome difficulties, but this process will not be easy. Clearing the debris, restoring farmland, and rebuilding lives will take many years, even decades. Despite suffering many losses, the villagers have not lost their will to live. They began clearing what remained, from broken pieces of wood to personal items buried in the mud. Their stories of resilience, from the farmer determined to replant crops to the family rebuilding their roof with simple materials, are an inspiration to everyone. They are not only rebuilding the village but also restoring faith in a brighter future. But to turn that future into reality, the collective effort of the international community is needed. Climate change is a global issue, and no country can solve it alone. Major countries, including China, need to make stronger commitments to reducing emissions, protecting the environment, and supporting vulnerable areas. At the same time, each individual also has their own role, from changing consumption habits to participating in environmental protection activities. The landslide and flood disaster in this small village is a painful reminder of nature's unforgiving nature. But it also proves the strength of humanity when they rise from the rubble, joining hands to rebuild their lives together. Although floodwaters remain and risks still lurk, hope has never been extinguished. With resilience, unity, and responsibility, people can overcome all challenges to continue writing the story of life and faith. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to the Beyond the Veil 0707 channel. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you again.